Hi, welcome to this presentation with Q3. My name is Eirik Øresland and I'm an analyst with ABG. With me today I have the CEO Håkon Volldal. He will give us a 20 minutes presentation and then we will round off with some questions after that. So with that, to give the word over to you, Håkon.
Thank you, Eirik. So let's start with some basic introduction to Q3 and then some slides on what we have done over the past couple of years and what we plan to do going forward. Next slide, please. If we start with the basics, Q3 was founded 38 years ago in Trondheim, Norway. We have been publicly listed for 20 years. We have offices in 15 countries around the world, but we sell products and solutions to roughly 50 markets around the world. We have 900 million NOK in revenues, or at least that was the revenues last year, and we achieved an EBITDA margin of 12%. In terms of presence and footprint, Europe is our most important region. We do 60% of our group sales in Europe. We have 65% of our employees there. The second most important region is Americas with 30% of sales and 25% of employees. And then we have Asia Pacific, which to us is essentially Australia and Thailand with 10% of sales and 10% of our employees. Overall, we have roughly 350 employees. Next slide, please. Q3 was founded in 1984 by a group of engineers coming out of the Technical University in Trondheim. And after looking into various different products based on radio technology, they were assigned with a task from the Norwegian Public Roads Administration to come up with a better mousetrap for collecting tolls. In the 80s, at least in Norway, the way road tolls were collected was by means of having a toll plaza with booths staffed by operators, and then you would throw a coin into a basket and a barrier would open. If you didn't hit the basket or you didn't have the exact amount, you would have to talk to the operator in order to get permission to proceed. So this was the technology, if you can call it technology, that was in place in the mid-80s, and Q3 was asked to replace that with a different concept. So we came up with a solution for automating this process, basically taking away the whole toll plaza, putting up a gantry with radio technology and equipping the cars with transponders that could automatically detect whether a car had passed this gantry or not, and automatically collect money from motorists. We did this successfully in 1988 outside Trondheim. We did it in Oslo in 1990. And based on successfully delivering these projects, the Q3 team then expanded operations to Europe and other parts of the world during the 90s and the first decade of this century. In 2010-11, the company decided to move into other segments of the traffic technology space and acquired a handful of small privately held companies in areas such as parking, traffic signal controlling, traffic management, way and motion. And by the end of 2016, the portfolio was rather big. I joined the company in August 2016 and was immediately tasked with the job to optimize the portfolio and also consider where to compete and what to sell. So more on that when we come back to the strategy part later on. But this is essentially the timeline of Q3. Next slide, please. Despite being a fairly small company out of Norway, we have left a big mark on the world. We have delivered prestigious tolling projects on all continents. We were the first to do congestion charging in Stockholm and Gothenburg. We have hundreds of toll stations in Norway. We did a nationwide truck tolling system in Slovenia. We do most of the toll collection in Portugal and now also in the northern part of Spain. We have toll installations in Australia, in Bangkok, in Denmark, in Chile, and also a number of installations in the US with toll operators there. On the traffic management side, we have central software systems for monitoring everything that happens on highways. And we have implemented these software systems with a number of DOTs, or Department of Transportation, which are state bodies. So every state in the US has a DOT, and they run a system to control traffic. And we delivered a top-level system for managing that traffic. We've done that in Virginia. We've done it in West Virginia, Colorado, Delaware, Alaska, Pennsylvania, etc. We've also done signal management, so solutions for running traffic signal operations and deciding when to shift from green to red and back again. We've done that in Georgia. We have 10,000 intersection controllers in Georgia, all the centralized systems that monitor a network of intersections. We do nationwide traffic counting in the UK, and we also do weigh in motion in different parts of the world. Next slide, please. In essence, what we do at Q-Free is that we try to address the three main challenges of modern mobility. And these three challenges are congestion, accidents, and pollution. We have solutions that will help traffic authorities and societies reduce congestion. We have solutions to prevent accidents and injuries on the road, and we have solutions that will help reduce the carbon footprint of traffic. Now, in reality, you don't sell a solution concept. You have to work with different divisions inside customer organizations. And the way we have set up Q-Free now is in two divisions. So if you give me the next slide. We have a tolling division and we have a traffic management division. In tolling, we have a full product offering. We have the onboard units that you have in your car to collect tolls. We have turnkey solutions, meaning the full toll stations with cameras, readers, lasers, etc. Everything you need in order to collect information about the vehicles that should pay toll. We have the software systems aggregating all this data and running analysis on the transactions in order to turn them into billable transactions for our customers. And we have special solutions for analyzing license plates and automating the information that we receive from license plates. So rather than having people manually looking at license plates, we have software to detect the license plate. Tolling represents roughly 2/3 of our revenues and 2/3 of our employees. Europe is the most important market in terms of revenues, 80%. Australia, Thailand represent 12%, and US and Chile represent 7%. In traffic management, we have the traffic signal controllers. These are the brains that basically decide when a traffic signal should shift from red to yellow to green. And we have the software systems that will collect information from all these different individual intersections and make sure that the system actually performs. I think we all have experienced, hitting a green light in one intersection and having to stop 30 meters down the road waiting for green light at that intersection. So it's not enough to optimize the flow in one intersection. You need a solution that will actually optimize the entire system. We also deliver these Freeway management software platforms. These are advanced software systems that are used in traffic management centers to monitor what's happening on the road. So typically when there's an accident, we have pre-programmed responses. Imagine there's a fire inside a tunnel. You don't want the operator to sit down and think, how do I address this situation? This has to happen automatically. So in our software, we have a button you click that will physically close the tunnel. You will get video feed from the scene of the accident up on the wall. You will alert the fire department, the police department. You will engage the ventilation systems. You will reroute traffic to secondary roads. You will slow down the speed limits, etc. This is just one example of a scenario, and there are multiple scenarios for handling everyday situations and also unplanned incidents. And then we do traffic counting, classification of vehicles, and weigh in motion systems. This is typically used by road authorities in order to get grants to maintain roads. Every state in the US, every council in the UK, for example, have to report traffic on the roads. And based on traffic on roads, they get allocations from a federal budget to maintain and make sure roads are kept in good conditions. Traffic management is the final 1/3 of our revenues, 120 employees. Most of our business happens in North America, 75% of it, 22% in Europe, and then 4% outside Europe and Americas. Next slide, please. If you look at our organization, we have 350 employees, 2 main locations for ATMS or traffic management. That's the US and the UK, whereas tolling has more of a global footprint where we have local organizations and teams in place to make sure we can service and maintain installed solutions and also sell new solutions. However, if you look at the breakdown per employee category, you can see that we are quite heavy on the R&D side. We have in total actually 130 engineers working in Q-Free in R&D and development. Delivery is not manufacturing, that's engineering and customization of solutions together with service and maintenance technicians, field technicians. We have roughly 40 people in sales and 40 people in admin. So we're a small company, but heavily skewed towards development. And this is the reason why Q-Free has been so innovative throughout its existence, that we have always prioritized R&D and we always invested in new technology. Next slide, please. So if we go from the basics to the plan that we have been following now for a number of years. When I joined, it was clear that we had to refocus. We had too many businesses. We were in too many countries and we didn't have the funding or the resources to be competitive across all these geographies and all these business areas. So we had to figure out, where do we have a competitive advantage? What kind of businesses should we prioritize? Once we had figured out that and cleaned up our portfolio, we would turn to the build phase. And there were 2 key objectives in this phase. 1, to build a strong presence in some markets. So rather than pursuing opportunities all over the world, make sure you have some really good core markets that every year give you revenues and turn a profit. Because unless you have that, you're not able to enter new markets. The second objective in this phase was to revamp our offering. In 2017-18, competition had caught up. Q-Free had always had good solutions to offer, but at that point in time, I wouldn't bet on Q-Free always coming out on top when customers would benchmark our solution versus solutions from competition. So that was the second priority, make sure we have the best portfolio in the industry. And the third phase, which we are in now, is really the fun part. So after cleaning up the company, building a strong foundation, we're now in the scale phase, where we want to scale standardized solutions to selected new target markets to grow the company. On the next slide, I will recapture what we did in the first phase. So of course, this was an effort that didn't happen over the course of 2-3 months. It took us years. We went from 6 business units to 2. We went from 21 to 15 markets. We went from almost 500 employees down to 350 employees. And we also had to fix the capital structure. We were not properly capitalized. We had a leverage ratio of 4.5 back in second quarter of 2019. By the end of the first quarter this year, we were at 1.2. So a much more healthy capital structure and also access to capital and liquidity to fund the growth. So this was all sort of basic fixing of the business. If you give me the next slide. This comes down to building a stronger presence in key markets. In tolling, we have 9 markets that really represent more than 80% of our revenues. And we have, over the past few years, focused a lot on winning projects and winning market share in these markets. And we've been quite successful. We have won numerous projects in Norway. We have won a renewal in Portugal. We have developed new clients in Portugal. We won several projects in Australia. We will renew the Stockholm congestion charging system. We have developed Slovenia into a healthy business. We have won projects in Thailand, signed up numerous customers in the US, etc. On the traffic management side, back in 2016, we had 2 key customers. Now we have at least 7 customers that account for more than 30% of revenues. And what we've also successfully done, which I will come back to later, is to increase the share of recurring revenues. So we don't start the year having to exceed last year without having anything to start with. On the tolling side, more than 30% of revenues are recurring. They come back every year. And on the traffic management side, 25%. And both these businesses have growing recurring revenues, which also means a lot of these contracts are secured on a long-term basis. In tolling, you typically have 8 to 12-year long contracts, and in traffic management, 5 to 10 years. So it's a much more predictable business with higher visibility. Next slide, please. The second key priority in the build phase was to revamp our offering. And I'm actually quite proud that we have touched every hardware product and every software product in our portfolio. We have made new transceivers and onboard units for tolling. We have made a new camera system. We have advanced our ALPR software, and we have upgraded our traffic management platform. So everything in our portfolio is new. Everything is not brand new. There are some smaller changes, but there are also some really revolutionary things that we've done. Next slide, please. The last thing we did, we have also focused on prioritizing projects. So if you look at the win rate we have on projects during the past 3.5 years, our win rate is actually 60%. So 60% of what we bid on, we win. And this has helped us grow the order backlog to almost 1.4 billion NOK. So that means 1.7 times last year revenues. Next slide, please. Recurring revenues. We have grown recurring revenues by 20% in 1 year. And in the first quarter this year, we have won 5 additional contracts, which will bring this recurring revenue portion to 320 million NOK, meaning more than 1/3 of our revenues are now recurring, fairly evenly split between software and services. Next slide, please. So now we really think it's time to shift gears. We need to grow. So next slide. We operate in a large and growing market, which is driven by the fact that we get more cars on the road and we need more goods to be transported. Tolling is growing at a rate of 6% and traffic management by a rate of 4% historically. And this is, of course, impacted by the pandemic. But there is healthy growth that we can capitalize on in addition to increasing our market share. Next slide, please. If we look at the rationale for expansion, this is a busy slide. You can study it in more detail later. But the point is we need off-the-shelf products in order to grow profitably. Every product sale cannot be a customized solution. So we have moved all the software components and all the hardware components to the right, which means we can sell these products to new customers without spending so much time delivering it. That's the key message on this slide. Next slide, please. A lot of new markets are opening up. We are in the fortunate position that we have existing markets that provide interesting opportunities, and we also have new markets that open up. And France, the Baltics, other Central European countries are now opening up for tolling and traffic management. Next slide, please. Our short-term pipeline opportunity is quite attractive. We have already signed projects for 500 million NOK. We have been awarded and are awaiting signature on 250 more. And there are opportunities that we are bidding on with a value of 1.5 billion NOK. Altogether, the order intake potential in 2022 is 2.3 billion. We will not win everything, but as I said, we have a hit rate of 60%. So I think order intake in 2022 will be great. And that also gives us good opportunity to grow in the coming years. Next slide, please. These are 6 examples of contracts we have won, ranging from tolling contracts in Spain to 4 important projects in Norway and a big tag contract in Portugal. And the great thing about these contracts is that most of them are recurring. They are on 15-year contracts. So Ålesund, Trondheim, Tromsø, and the E6 contract in Norway are on 15-year contracts that will generate close to 15 million NOK in recurring revenues every single year with a good margin. Next slide, please. In terms of financial performance, this is the final section of my presentation. It was really a roller coaster ride up until 2016. In the past 5 years, we have stabilized performance. We have focused on profitability rather than revenue growth. So this is the reason why revenues have come down. We have divested underperforming businesses, but look at the improvement and the stability in profitability. Next slide, please. We have strong current KPIs. We have a good organic revenue growth. We have a high share of software revenues. We have a high share of recurring revenues, strong profitability, good cash flow conversion, and also a healthy backlog and good leverage ratio. So I think from a financial point of view, we're set to grow. Next slide, please. And if you look at our long-term financial targets, we believe we can deliver 10% annual growth on average. M&A will come on top. We believe we can expand margins because we have scalable solutions. We don't need to add many resources to grow revenues. So we're already at 12% EBITDA margin. If we can grow by 10% annually, we will get to our margin targets. So the margin expansion will happen as a consequence of selling more software with higher margins and not adding a lot in terms of OpEx. Next slide, please. So in sum, to round off this presentation, we operate in a large and growing market. We have leading positions in tolling globally and in traffic management in North America. We have the best portfolio, I dare to say, when it comes to technology and unique references. We have 350 skilled industry professionals. We have a clear plan for how to grow, and we have an attractive starting point in terms of financials. Thank you.
Thank you, Håkon. We have time for a few questions. There seems to be a particularly strong demand for your tolling products at the moment. Can you give us a comment on explaining the key drivers on the current increase in demand that you're seeing in the tolling segment?
It's two things. One, a lot of big tolling markets have old assets that they need to replace. So we are replacing old infrastructure in Australia, Portugal, Chile, France, Stockholm, Norway. So this is really, a key driver for us. The second driver is that road authorities are underfunded. So to deliver on all the plans they have for making traffic smoother and better and more fit for the future, they need funding. And the only way to get funding is to implement tolling.
And while the backlog appears very strong for tolling, there seems to be slightly lower visibility on the traffic management side. So could you shed some light on how you're working with sales and marketing in traffic management and what products you expect to be the most important going forward?
Yeah, so for us operating in traffic management in North America, the pandemic has really been a challenge. Customers have not been at work, not been able to take deliveries of purchase orders in the field, and they've not been able to process tenders and actually run tender processes. So everything stopped during the pandemic. Now it's coming back. So we see an increased activity level, both for statewide software systems and for modern and better traffic signal systems. So we expect the US to bring in some really nice contracts this year, and this will continue going forward, especially on the software side.
Sounds good. And I think you said the recurring revenue share is around 1/3 now. Could you give us a comment or a brief overview of the most important recurring contract structures in your portfolio at the currently and their duration as well?
Yeah, so on the service and maintenance side, we have these long-term service contracts from 8 to 15 years. So that's probably the most important one in terms of overall contribution. Then we have roughly 50% of our recurring revenue, so 150 million NOK coming from software. So various software products that we put on SaaS contracts, and I think this will grow going forward. It was challenging to convert from on-premise to cloud, but now all customers are sort of experienced cloud users and they demand cloud solutions. So this will also grow going forward. So it's a combination of more service and maintenance contracts and more software sales structured as SaaS contracts and not, product sales with perpetual licenses.
Yeah. And have you set a target for how much recurring revenue that you think can be achievable in the long term?
I think right now we're around 30%. So let's say we can increase to 40% of a much higher revenue base. So let's say by 25, 26, we can be at 450, 500 million NOK in recurring revenues given today's business model. And if we successfully convert some of these other business models, it could be more. But ARR will grow much faster than total revenue growth.
Yeah, good to hear. And lastly, there have been several transactions in the ITS market recently. For instance, your competitor Unix was acquired by Atlantia, and in your Q1 report, you commented that you consider to take part in attractive structural opportunities if they should arise. So, could you give us a comment on what kind of transactional opportunities Q-Free see and that potentially could arise?
I think what we're seeing right now is that private equity has really set their eyes on traffic technology. They want to deploy billions of euros in this industry. They think it's driven by fundamental good macro drivers, and they start with the big assets, but then they want to consolidate. And of course, then Q-Free is a very attractive piece of the puzzle that they might need in order to complement the portfolios of the bigger guys. And they need some sexy pieces that they are not getting through the main acquisition. So that's really what's behind, the recent M&A activities that the PE guys want to enter and they want to consolidate. And of course, we are we will be and we are approached by some of these players to see if there's a strong strategic rationale behind combining businesses. And then, it's up to the board and the shareholders to decide whether they want to pursue a given opportunity or not. But I expect that this industry will consolidate going forward and at fairly attractive multiples.
It will definitely be interesting to see what happens going forward. I see that we are running out of time now, so thank you for the presentation, Håkon, and thank you for the ones who listened in.
Thank you.